All right. We have for you guys Clayton Hutchins. We are super excited to talk all things triathlon here in a second. And Clayton, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, he's tuning in from nice old warm Maui while I'm bundled up over here in my down jacket. I think it was 34 degrees this morning here at my house. So quite a difference here. What time of day is it for you?
It's 10 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So I've had a little workout this morning.
Nice.
And yeah, it'll be good to chat.
Yeah, perfect. So as our listeners know, we will start with our two truths and a lie before we get too much info on your history and background. So go ahead and break those down for us.
Yeah, so I'll start with I've competed in the 2000 Olympic trials for the 5K for
Okay.
running.
Wow.
And I've cooked in two restaurants. And the last one is I ran a marathon after college.
Okay. Okay. I know you're big into cooking, so I feel like the middle one is a possibility. Um, why not run a marathon after college? I feel like that's something you would do. And you're saying you completed 2,000 different events, is what you're saying was the first one?
No, that was I've cooked in two restaurants, and then I
Mm-hmm.
competed in the 2016 Olympic trials
Oh,
for the
2006.
five,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Olympic trials. Gotcha. Okay.
for track and field. Yeah.
I feel like the last one's a lie. I don't know. What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I'm either leaning towards that or maybe it was not the 5K. Maybe it was a different distance event for the Olympic trials. I'm always going for like the sneaky one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll
Cool.
go with that.
To go with the first one. Okay. I'm going with the full marathon, different ends of the spectrum here on distance. Um, we'll reveal the answer at the end for our listeners here. But Clayton, why don't you first give us a little bit of background, and this might reveal some of your truths or lies. Um,
Probably, yeah.
where did you grow up? What got you excited about endurance sports?
I grew up in Marin County in San Anselmo, and my grandfather was a two-time Olympian in 1948 and 1952.
Mm.
My mom was a half Ironman world champion
Oh,
for
nice.
age group back in, I don't know when that would have been, when I was like little boy, maybe 2010 or so.
Yeah.
So I kind of grew up in that endurance family. My dad was just a avid runner. He did the Dipsy all the time. Uh,
Nice.
Local race in Mill Valley that's pretty prestigious. Um, so I grew up in middle school running, not very competitively, just kind of getting out there and having fun. My dad was my coach for our middle school at White Hill Middle School.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, for cross country and track. And that was still kind of just whatever I wanted to do, wasn't very competitive, had some
Hmm.
fun. And then I got a bit more competitive in high school and started with a new coach that came in that saw potential in me and my teammate, John Lawson,
Mm.
and basically brought us through the 4 years and progressed us. His goal was to get us a scholarship to a college or university. And he did that. I got a scholarship to Cal Poly, Polytechnic University in San Luis Obispo. Ran there for 4.5 years.
Mm.
Had a few injuries,
Mm.
which if most people in college they do get some injuries just because it's
Yeah.
such a tough sport and that's all you're doing. There's not much you can do other than that. Like you can cross train, but then when you come back, it's still very difficult to get back to that top level.
Hmm.
So my last year was kind of just like every 2 months, I would get a little injury and it would just be kind of like going down and down and down. And my teammate was reading a forum and he heard about this collegiate recruitment program for converting either collegiate runners or collegiate swimmers
Mm.
into triathletes
Hmm.
for USA. And so it was like a fast track program that
Wow.
basically gave you all the funding, brought you down to the high performance training center in San Diego, and tried to get you to that professional level within 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, hey, why not? I wanted to run post collegiately, but I wasn't quite there in the national level. I was like just under that. So I went with it and had to complete a few standards in the pool because I've had no swim training previously, kind of growing up surfing and comfortable in the ocean, but not any specific swim training.
Yeah.
So I had a few standards that I had to hit, and I got those within maybe it was about 4 weeks or 5 weeks of swim specific training. I had an online coach that I was working with at the time.
Wow.
So I hit those and basically just applied to the program, and they were like, you're a great candidate. Let's get you out. And I visited down in San Diego and then started with one of the collegiate recruitment coaches, Jared Evans, and we started from there. And basically the goal was to get my swim to a level that I could be competitive in ITU racing.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that, and I was with USA for 2.5 years, and then I transferred over to Canada just last year.
Wow.
Because I had some more opportunities on that side with their national program. So basically from college until now, it's been about 4 years. I graduated in 4 or 5 years, 2018.
Oh, wow.
So I've been on the road since then and living my dream of trying to go to the Olympics. So.
Wow. That's awesome. And so initially it was purely running. And then to get into that initial program in Southern California, it was for triathlon.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had to learn how to swim and meet those benchmarks. And do you have to do any cycling stuff and meet any benchmarks there?
There wasn't any specific like power files that you needed to hit or anything. It was more just they wanted you to have a few decent skills, which I grew up riding in Marin in the trails on mountain bikes. So
nice. Yeah.
I had some good skills on the cycling side. It was more just building that power base. I had the fitness aerobic capacity from running. So
yeah,
the transfer over wasn't as hard as I thought. Definitely the pushing the power on the flats was much more difficult because they say like runners can climb much better just because you can stand a lot more, but a lot of our racing is not done on super hilly courses. So it's more of that flat power and building those specific muscles down there that I didn't have from running.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I think it's fascinating. And I was just talking to somebody recently too about if you take a professional runner and put them on a bike, or you take a professional cyclist and you make them run, who does better on the sport? And from what we were talking about from our thought was like runners, it's just a different stimulus aerobically, I think, that's more challenging than taking a cyclist and then making them run.
Yeah, I think if you had a difference if you're going up a climb, I'd say a runner would definitely do better than if a cyclist was to transfer over to running. Because you're using more similar muscles when you go uphill than flat, because you can stand and kind of stretch out a bit more. But yeah, it's been way different transferring over. And I think the biggest thing has been learning how to run off the bike. I was going to come in with a 14:05 5K PR and be able to compete with some of the top guys on the run, but learning not only physically but mentally to get off the bike and be either further back in the group or having like pretty heavy legs from riding. So mentally trying to get past that, and I would feel better as I ran throughout the 5K or 10K, depending on the distance.
Yeah.
Just because I'd be able to kind of get out all that blood from the legs and be a bit fresher.
Mm-hmm.
And mentally too, like in any running race, you start and you feel good.
Yeah.
You only really start to hurt if you're progressing and you're doing the right pace. You're only going to really start to hurt until the last, like, maybe kilometer when it really starts to hurt. But in the run, or in the triathlon, it's kind of opposite in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the hardest transfer over. And then also the very, very competitive swim level that you have to get to make a bike group, and then so on and so on.
Yeah. Coming from a running background, of the 3 disciplines in triathlon, what's your favorite sport?
I'd say at the start it was definitely cycling, just because it was much different than what I have done in the past, because you're out there a bit longer. You can, at the start, I would go to a couple of cafes and enjoy like where I was training and with the people, and you can chat really easily because you're riding at maybe a bit easier aerobic pace. And swimming, I'd say, was definitely the hardest, because you'd go to the pool and either by yourself or with teammates, but once you get in the pool, you're not chatting much. You're underwater. You can't speak, right? And I always wondered, we shared a locker room with the swimmers in college, and we'd come back from our runs, take showers, whatever, be like similar volume levels of when we were out, like chatting. And then the swimmers would come in from the pool and they would start yelling and screaming. But now it makes sense, because they go through their 2-hour practice and not able to chat at all about what's going on and all that kind of stuff. They'd come into the locker room just yelling and screaming. But now I kind of know, like, maybe that feeling. I don't just swim. Obviously, I do swim, bike, run, depending on the day, like all 3 or just 2 or 1. But yeah, now I know why they were so loud in the locker rooms.
Yeah. Chatting it up. So recently you had a pretty major win.
Yeah.
Canadian. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, and we can dive into all things nutrition and hydration, of course.
Yeah. So it's early July. There was actually kind of 2 races in one. So the Canadian National Championships, sprint distance championships, and then also just a regular America's Cup sprint distance triathlon. So the goal going into it was obviously to try to win both. And leading up to it, I had maybe like a 5-week block of pretty consistent, pretty good training, feeling quite good with specific brick workouts that we were doing, where we would do, say, for example, we'd do 3 sets of like a 10-minute bike kind of race effort with a few teammates. And then we do a full transition where we put our bikes on racks and get our race shoes on, and then do like a 5-minute run. But we do that 3 times. And I was running close to, if not faster than, like 15-minute 5K pace. So around like low 440s per mile. So definitely feeling quite good on that end. And I was with my good training partner, Tyler Mislachuk, who's 2-time Olympian.
Nice.
Really good to have him around.
Yeah.
And so the training was going super well leading into it. Had some really good confidence. And the race itself was, it was in Montreal, and it was in a rowing basin, the swim. And then we raced on the bike and the run. It was on the Formula One track.
Cool.
All closed off. So it was very flat, not very technical. And I knew it was going to be a running race. The bike was most likely going to all come together, and that's what happened. Came out of the water in like 6th, and then slowly, like, just guys from the back came up, and then we got off the bike, and there was maybe like 50 or 60 guys in the group. And I got off transition from the bike to the run in first.
Wow.
Had a really good transition. And then just ran out of transition with maybe a 10-second lead on the rest of the group.
Wow.
And I look back and I thought they were going to come up quicker than they did, but I kind of just like tried to relax, dropped it down to more of a tempo pace and let them catch. And then it was only like a group of 3 or 4 of us. And then it came down to a sprint finish with one other guy. And he ended up winning, but he was American and I finished second, which gave me the Canadian National title. But I got second in the America's Cup race.
Nice. Wow. That's
so
awesome.
Overall, it was a very good race. It was probably the first race that I felt like in the race that I could win the race, like the confidence that I could win the race, and that it felt, I wouldn't say easier, but more controlled than most races that I passed.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. And for our listeners, what total time are you out there on course?
Yeah, so this was a sprint distance, so it was around 52 minutes.
Okay.
So we're doing a 750-meter swim, 20-kilometer bike, and then a 5K run.
Okay, awesome.
Continuous.
And so it was 2 events. Were they back to back, or were they
they were
the same?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, interesting. So you didn't have to do one day and again the next day.
No. So there was definitely a lot more Canadians that went to this specific race just because it was a national championships, and obviously you'd like to do well in that specific event. But there was also other people from mostly them like North America, not maybe a few Europeans, but not too many that came over for that specific race.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And so tell us, with something that's 55-ish minutes, are you fueling or hydrating during?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for training, I try to, and what we've worked on in the past is basically getting as much carbohydrate as possible. Like, I think I'm probably up to, in training, 90 to 100, and I'd like to progress that further.
That's great.
In racing, you prepare for like as much as possible. Like I probably had about maybe 80 grams total of carbs either in my bottle, and then I had one gel that we electrical tape on our top tube of our bike, and you can easily just pull it off and then take it. So that was only maybe like a 24-gram gel, and then I had maybe about 60 grams of Osmo Power Fuel in my bottle.
Nice.
And I'm never like, oh, I have to have that much, because it depends on the race and depends on the level and like if you have time to drink or not, or but I was able to get in a decent amount. I wouldn't say I got in 80 grams, but maybe 60 grams. I had the gel and maybe half the bottle. So it depends on the difficulty of the race, because sometimes you don't have anything, like just because you're like on the gas the entire time and you can't take like your hands off the bars or anything. So you don't really know, but you don't want to necessarily like be like, okay, I have to get in that exact amount so it'll throw off your mental. But ideally you'd get in around 80, because the distance is around an hour. So
yeah, that's great. And talking about, you mentioned the transition, and I think that is something that the T2 bike to run, I think that is something that a lot of clients struggle with. So could you walk through, like, what is your T2 like? And one of my questions is, do you wear socks or no socks? It's a question I've had clients mention and ask, but also what else is happening at that T2 for you?
So basically it obviously depends on the bike groups. It could be So usually my races are around 70 people, and you could come into transition T2, which is bike to run, with 70 guys, or you could come in separate groups of 5 or 10 or 20. But ideally you want to be at the front of that group, because going through transition, it's pretty much single file. So if you're at the back of that group, you can come out of transition last and be sometimes 10 to 15 seconds down on the guy that's come out first. And 15 seconds in a 5K is a decent amount. Like you can't close that in the first 2K, right? And that by that time, if he's a good runner, he'll be gone. So usually I try to get in first, but that's everybody's goal, is to get in first. So there's a lot of fighting and some bumping around, but you get used to that the more you race. And then I basically rack my bike, and I have a magnetic buckle on my helmet.
Oh, cool.
So I easily remove that. It really helps if it's a cold swim as well. You can kind of just kind of throw it on and it'll clip.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's kind of like a little bit of a tactic that you can use, is magnetic buckles. You can just buy them on Amazon. You can sew them on yourself, or I don't know, take it to your local shop and they'll put it on for you.
That's a great idea. I feel like our teenagers right now need that around. I don't know if you've seen it, Clayton, but there's so many kids on like e-bikes out here in Marin. None of them have helmets.
I've heard a couple stories about from my parents about that.
Yeah.
They don't have the technical skills to ride a bike at 30 miles an hour.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And they need helmets. They don't know how to hook their helmets is the other thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on. Your genius magnet idea is great.
Yeah. So we have special triathlon shoes they're just a Velcro strap. So you can easily remove those. And going into transition, I'll put my feet on top of the shoes barefoot. So I can just dismount my bike really easily, and I'm not in my specific bike shoes itself. So I'm running barefoot through transition with my bike shoes still clipped onto my bike. And then we'll rack the bike and undo the helmet, and then put on the race shoes with special like elastic laces that we have, so we can just slip our feet right in and not have to tie our shoes or anything. And no, I don't wear socks for both sprint and Olympic, just because it's like I couldn't imagine trying to put socks on and get back into the race. I wouldn't be able to think of that. I know in long course racing they do put socks on, and that's one thing that I do get a few blisters and cuts on my feet, but at the end it's worth it, and you kind of build a little bit of a tolerance. But I think if you're just getting into the sport, I think the transition shouldn't necessarily be the focus, because you can definitely make up more time in training if you're focused on your specific swim, bike, run. And you want to be comfortable as well. So if socks are something that give you comfort, then you can wear socks. But if you like to go barefoot, then you can start that practice early. It's kind of up to the person, up to their level. And but that wasn't the first thing that I practiced. It was the specific swim, bike, run.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, those are all amazing tips for sure. And I mean, down to taping your gel on the top tube and that kind of stuff. I think there's so many little ways to get the nutrition, transport it, but also making sure you're getting it from whatever your pocket, your bike into your body is important. And finding ways that make that work makes it go a bit smoother. Did you use, out of curiosity, the caffeinated Power Fuel or regular?
I just use the regular, just because I take a caffeine gel before.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And I haven't played around too much with the caffeine Power Fuel, just because I do think that it will help me at the end of the day, but I'm still trying to like find the balance and find the balance of caffeine. And then
Yeah.
I've tried a few other things out there that I feel like might inhibit it or kind of take away from maybe that. I want to kind of like focus, okay, does this work? Does that work? Does this work? And then I can find and kind of
Yeah.
fine tune exactly what works well, but also like I don't want to get too comfortable with one specific thing because I might not even be able to use it at the end of the day.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I forget. Did we do any 23andMe testing, genetic testing for
Yeah.
caffeine? We did. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really fascinating area of research looking into that for with regards to performance. But then
Yeah.
there's also all the other caveats of like someone could have the genetics that say, hey, I'm a fast metabolizer, I'll perform better with caffeine. But then they also have I think the other gene is called Adora too, which is basically just means they get like insane anxiety when they do caffeine, which is not beneficial when you're trying to race, right? So yeah, experimenting is obviously important and figuring out timing of when you kind of feel like again, all that stuff. So yeah, I think experimentation is important. What did your breakfast look like, if you remember that, or do you have like a typical go-to before your races or around race morning?
Yeah, so actually in this specific race, I didn't have the best time getting in my meal in the morning. I don't know what it was specifically, if it was maybe more nerves or just some GI issues, or I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
But I try to get up 3 to 3.5 hours before my race, which it was an early race. It's either 7:30 or 8, so up early, 4 a.m., 5. And usually my go-to is rice with maple syrup or honey or brown sugar or whatever I can find at the local market.
Wow.
And then also maybe some flattened Coke or other type of soda just to get a little bit more carb in. But I was really struggling that morning for some reason, getting in my rice and that. So I got it all in, but I ended up throwing up before I left for the race.
No.
Yeah, throwing up before I left for the race. And then on the way to the race, I had just a carb drink. It was maybe like 80 grams of carbs. And right after my run warm up, I threw up again.
Oh, shoot.
And I don't know if that was like a trigger from the caffeine gel or if that was just something that was happening. I don't know what it was specifically.
Yeah.
So that obviously wasn't ideal. So I had 2 gels again before, and I was able to get that down. And then once I was on the start, like the pontoon start line, I felt totally fine.
That's good.
So it could have been a bit more nerves than usual, just because maybe there was a bit more pressure on the line with Canadian nationals, and I was just joining Canada as an athlete and wanted to show that I like belong there and represent my country and stuff. So I don't know specifically what that was, but I've been able to, and in my last race, I did quite well with that. Is I resorted more to like carb drink, and then I had a few just Morton bars, which I felt settled in my stomach quite well.
Yeah.
Because there's still a little bit of a substance to it. And then a couple bananas, and I felt like that was maybe a bit easier on my stomach. It was an early race on my last race, but maybe there was a bit less stress, or I'm not exactly sure, but it definitely felt easier getting in, and I had no GI distress or anything like that.
That's good.
So, but it's totally dependent on, because I can usually like drink and eat as much as I want and have no problems in training. For some reason, like it comes to race morning and it's just so difficult to get food down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Stress. I think I'll get better at it, hopefully, as I go. But I definitely don't like the early morning races, just because maybe you feel a bit more like, okay, I have a specific window that I have to get in all this carb. I have like a time sheet and I try to like follow that. And whereas if it's a later race, you wake up, you can take your time and kind of enjoy your breakfast rather than just like shoveling it down, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're spot on with that. Is like there are so many added factors, nerves for sure, right? And then if it's a totally unusual time that you wouldn't normally eat that much at,
Yeah.
your digestive system is likely just not ready to process that much nutrition. And then yeah, like you said, the caffeine too can have some, trigger some stomach, like actual stomach, not lower GI, stomach upset as well. So did you end up doing, you said you did 2 more gels after, were those caffeinated too, or no?
No, those were just regular.
Yeah.
I bring like a bunch of spare stuff just in case. I'll bring like a bag of power fuel and a bunch of gels and banana or whatever.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, oh, if I want another gel, I'll have it. Or if on the weird side, if I throw up, I can have a bit more. But yeah, I mean, I've played around with a lot of different things. When we started working, I started doing the preload hydration from Osmo, and that was for the night before and then the morning of for hotter races, which a lot of my races this year have been in quite hot conditions, like 30 plus degrees Celsius, and either in Mexico or Korea, or Dominican Republic. So that's helped. But I also think that adding in, like, say you're adding in caffeine, and then I've been playing around with bicarb, and then the preload hydration, like all of these things in your stomach are like, I would think at the end of the day, they're kind of fighting against each other and just tossing and turning. And so now I've kind of like realized what works, what doesn't work together, and I kind of like separate them and kind of, I don't think I quite have it exactly, but it definitely takes a lot of trialing and error. And so that's another side of the sport that's a lot of people don't necessarily think of, but I think it's definitely progressing to that end, in short course racing, specifically the intaking carbs during the event, and where before it wasn't like that.
Nope, they would just do nothing.
Yeah, I mean, my teammate Tyler, he started racing in 2010 or so, and he's like just starting to incorporate. He would maybe have a gel here and there on the bike and stuff, but starting to incorporate more carbohydrates and working with a nutritionist and kind of dialing in that side of the sport, just because he sees it in other athletes. Like, for example, he was racing at the World Championships and he saw one of the French athletes had, like, I think he said it was an Olympic distance race, so around 2 hours, and he had 6 or 7 gels taped to his top tube. But he asked him after the race, and he said that because it was a quite technical course with some cobbles, and he said that just in case, like if my bottles fell off or fell off, I would have some extras. But you definitely see it more and more. Just more athletes, either they're doing it in training or they're doing it in racing. It's kind of like you learn from others, right? You learn from what the best are doing, and obviously if they're doing it and they're doing really well, then kind of the way you need to go.
It's really, I think it's just so fascinating, like where we're going from an athletic performance perspective and also an intake perspective. It's incredible how much some of these athletes are taking in per hour and actually utilizing it too. When they get like tested, you can see that they're actually oxidizing the nutrition that they're taking in. It's not just building up in the gut, which is, I mean, it's amazing. So, and they're performing better and faster too. So, especially when you start doing the longer and longer stuff. So with something like that distance, the sprint distance, do you do carb loading leading up to that?
Not specifically. I would say that I definitely maybe I'll have a little extra portion of rice or bread or pasta. But it's definitely not as specific as, say, an Olympic distance. Just because it's only an hour, and I do think that the amount of like burn that I'm doing, it's quite high, but I'm also the amount that I have just in general with my regular diet, I think it's enough to get me through the event itself. And like the other thing about racing and training is that like I train so well and I can perform really, really well in training and I'm still just kind of like doing my normal diet that I'll do. So I'm like, well, if I'm doing really well in training, then why should I change so much leading to the big race? That I don't totally change exactly what I'll eat. I'll definitely, the night before the race, I'll definitely have a bit more, whatever, rice or pasta or bread or something, and maybe a little bit less protein. But once I get into Olympic distance, I'll definitely try to have more carbs leading in like 2 to 3 days before. And we've done that specific protocol with kind of going from, I don't know what it was, around like 800 grams and then down to 700, 650. I don't measure it specifically, but it's just kind of, I know now that it's what type of foods I need and the volume of those specific foods.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big eye opener for a lot of people when they like run the numbers and they're like, oh my goodness, it's a lot of carbs. So I want to be mindful of your time here too. So you said you're kind of going into your postseason right now. Is that what I got?
Yeah. So my last race was October. When was it? It's end of October 30th or 28th, October 20th, in Miyazaki, Japan.
Oh yeah.
And that was Olympic distance. That didn't go quite as how I planned. I had some like uncontrollable back pain in the start of the bike, and
oh wow,
it was a very, very hard. It was a World Cup race, so a lot of the top guys were racing there, and I had pretty high expectations leading into it, but I just couldn't do anything about the back pain, and kind of was off the back and kind of chasing a bit for the run. But overall, it was okay, and I always have a great trip when I go to Japan. It's probably one of my favorite countries to go visit, with the food, the culture there, and the carb loading is quite easy with all the really good rice as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I've had a full week off of, I maybe did a hike with my dad and did a little bit of a gravel ride back home in Marin, and maybe like one little gym session and some yoga last week. And then this week is kind of, I wake up and do whatever I want, whether it's go surfing or go for a gravel ride or road ride or run or kind of whatever I choose. And my coach has basically given me, he's like, maximum 12 hours. Don't do any more. You can do 2 hours if you want. You can do kind of whatever you'd like. And then the third week is back to more program training. So he'll write in I use Training Peaks, and he'll write specific sessions, but that'll maybe only be kind of depending on what volume I do this week. It'll be maybe like 3-5% more than what I did So not
Okay.
much more, and just slowly reintroducing some programming and getting
Yeah.
back into more of a routine. But he's very, he likes you to kind of shut off completely mentally,
Yeah.
physically as well. And I'm not tracking any of my metrics, and um, not really, I mean, getting as much sleep as I need, not setting an alarm, and
Awesome.
eating what I want as well. And not that I have a specific program that I follow during season.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of know what I need and like what I don't need.
Yeah.
It's obviously a much different once I'm getting into this end of December, January is where I'm training like 30 to 35 hours a week and
Wow.
really get in as much food as I can, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to, in the time I have now, I try to get in a bit of a surplus, like put on a bit of extra weight. And
Mm.
so I'm not trying to catch up when I'm really training hard and
Yeah.
burning a lot of calories, like probably up to 6,000, 7 calories a day on some days. So
Mm-hmm.
like you have to resort to high calorie sodas and juice and like kind of that bad stuff that they would say, but um, I'm able to burn through it super quickly.
Yeah. I love that you said that your goal is to put on a little bit of weight right now. Cause I think a lot of people during the postseason, some of them just shut off and then unintentionally put on weight because they're not thinking the long game, maybe. But, but I think also some try and maintain their peak race weight, which is not usually realistic either. So I think that's important. You said that.
Yeah.
That's great. And so is your first race in January or February next year?
No, so I'll start back up in probably the first week of March.
Oh, okay. Nice. And so you'll take 2 weeks off or 2 to 3 weeks. It sounds like pretty mellow, do as you feel. And then you're getting back into easing back into the programming with your coach to build up
Yeah.
for the March races. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Before we finish up here, we got to reveal our two truths and a lie. So circling back, you had said you competed in the 2016 Olympic trials for the 5K. You've cooked
Yeah.
in 2 restaurants and you ran a marathon after college. I was thinking the marathon might have been a lie. Amanda said you said the Olympic trials, right, Amanda?
Yeah, for the 5K, I figured maybe
Yeah.
there's something sneaky.
Which one was your lie?
So I haven't completed a marathon. That's the lie. I have a big passion for cooking, so I've cooked in. I worked at the bakery in Marin, MHBV, for 2 summers.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and that was back in college.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and the Olympic trials, that was a really cool opportunity. The qualifying time was only like 14:45 or so, and I was able to go up there and race in my college jersey.
Wow.
So that was quite cool.
Amazing.
So cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. This has been super, super fascinating, Clayton, and we definitely appreciate all your nuggets. Goodness, I don't think we've ever talked with any of our guests about the transition tips. So that's going to be a new one for our listeners. Helpful little nuggets there, all those things. I think that was really neat. Where can people find you, follow you, all that stuff?
Yeah, so I have Instagram as my main social media at Clayton Hutch. I also have a website that you guys could maybe link in the podcast as well. I can send that over to you.
Perfect. Yeah, we will link that.
And those are my 2 views.
Awesome. Well, we will link those in the show notes for the listeners.
Perfect.
And maybe we will follow up with you too on that magnet helmet clip that you like to use, or your stretchy shoelaces or something like
Perfect.
that. I'm sure listeners are going to want to know what those are, where they can get those. So we will link those for our listeners. And thank you again so much for your time, Clayton. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys very much.